The scraping sound of metal against ice was the most satisfying thing I had heard all week, right up until I saw the silver Lexus pulling up to my driveway with its hazards flashing like some kind of emergency vehicle. I stopped my grader mid-scrape and watched as Patricia Chambers stepped out of her car, wearing a white puffer jacket that probably cost more than my entire winter wardrobe. The president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA had arrived, and judging by the way she was power walking toward me with her phone already in hand, this was not going to be a friendly, neighborly chat about the weather. "Sam Sullivan, you need to stop this immediately," Patricia called out, her voice cutting through the cold February morning air in Wisconsin. I could see my breath clouding in front of me as I leaned against the grader controls, waiting for whatever complaint she had cooked up this time. "Stop what exactly?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I had lived in Meadowbrook Heights for 3 years now, and Patricia had found something to complain about at least once every few months. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My holiday lights stayed up 2 days past the HOA deadline. My grass was a 1/4 inch too long during the summer. The list went on. This machinery. You are operating heavy equipment on a residential street without proper permits or authorization. This is a violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws regarding construction and maintenance activities. I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "Patricia, I am scraping ice off the road. The entire street is covered in 3 inches of solid ice from that freezing rain last night. The city has not gotten around to our neighborhood yet, and people cannot even get out of their driveways. I am doing everyone a favor." "A favor?" Her voice went up an octave. "You are creating a disturbance at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. You are operating equipment that could damage the road surface. And you are doing all of this without going through the proper channels. The HOA board would need to approve any modifications to common areas, which includes the street." "The street is not actually HOA property," I pointed out. "It is a public street maintained by the city of Green Bay. I checked before I started." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "That may be, but the noise ordinance still applies. And I am certain that operating a grader requires some kind of commercial license or permit." "I have a commercial driver's license," I said. "I work in construction. This is literally what I do for a living, and I am not charging anyone for this. I am just trying to make the street safe so kids do not slip and break their necks walking to the bus stop." "That is not the point, Sam. The point is that you did not ask permission. You cannot just decide to do whatever you want in this community. We have rules for a reason. We have standards to maintain. This is why we have an HOA in the first place." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Okay, Patricia. What would you like me to do? Should I just leave the ice here? Should I let Mrs. Henderson try to drive to her dialysis appointment on this sheet of ice? She is 83 years old. That is not my problem. That is what emergency services are for. If people cannot get out, they can call for help. What you are doing is taking it upon yourself to make decisions that affect the entire community without consulting anyone. That is unacceptable." I was about to respond when Patricia pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Since you refuse to see reason, I am calling the police. They can sort this out and explain to you why what you are doing is illegal. You are calling the cops, because I am removing ice from the street. I am calling the authorities because you are operating heavy machinery without authorization, creating a public disturbance, and refusing to comply with HOA regulations." She turned away from me slightly, the phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, hello. I need to report someone operating construction equipment illegally on a residential street." I watched in disbelief as Patricia gave the dispatcher our address, and explained the situation with all the urgency of someone reporting a burglary in progress. When she hung up, she crossed her arms and gave me a satisfied look. "The police will be here shortly. I suggest you turn off that equipment and wait." "Fine," I said, shutting down the grader, "but you are making a huge deal out of nothing. We will see what the police have to say about that." We stood there in awkward silence for about 10 minutes. A few of my neighbors had come out onto their porches, probably drawn by the commotion. I could see Jim Martinez across the street giving me a thumbs up, and the Kowalski family 2 doors down watching from their front window. The ice on the street glittered in the morning sun, a beautiful hazard that nobody seemed to want to deal with officially. When the patrol car finally pulled up, I felt a mixture of irritation and resignation. This was ridiculous. I was trying to help, and now I was going to have to explain myself to the police because Patricia could not handle anyone doing anything without her explicit approval. But then the officer stepped out of the car, and I had to suppress a grin. Uncle Mike. Officer Michael Sullivan, my mother's younger brother, walked toward us with his characteristic no-nonsense stride, his hand resting casually on his belt. He had been with the Green Bay Police Department for 20 years, and I had not seen him since Christmas dinner at my parents' house 6 weeks ago. "Sam," he said with a nod, then turned to Patricia. "I am Officer Sullivan. You called about illegal construction activity." Patricia straightened up, apparently pleased to have official backup. "Yes, officer. This man has been operating that grader without any permits or authorization. He is creating a disturbance and potentially damaging public property." Uncle Mike looked at the grader, then at the scraped section of street behind me where the ice had been cleared away, revealing the bare pavement underneath. Then he looked at the untouched section ahead, still covered in the treacherous ice layer. "Sam, you got your CDL on you?" "Yes, sir." I pulled out my wallet and handed him my commercial driver's license. Uncle Mike examined it, then handed it back. "And who owns the grader?" "I do. I bought it at an auction last year for my contracting business. It is registered and insured." "Uh-huh." Uncle Mike turned back to Patricia. "Madam, what exactly is the problem here?" "The problem is that he is operating heavy machinery without permission. The HOA bylaws clearly state that any modifications or maintenance to common areas requires board approval." "This is a public street, though," Uncle Mike said. "City property. HOA does not have jurisdiction over that." "The noise ordinance still applies," Patricia insisted. "It is Saturday morning and he started this before 8 a.m. Uncle Mike pulled out a small notebook. "Green Bay noise ordinance allows construction and maintenance activities starting at 7 a.m. on weekends, provided they are not unreasonably loud. Scraping ice off a road seems pretty reasonable to me, especially given the conditions." He gestured at the ice covering the street. "City has not made it out here yet." "Not yet," I said. "I called it in last night, but they said they were prioritizing main roads and emergency routes. This is a residential side street, so we are probably going to be waiting until Monday or Tuesday." "That tracks," Uncle Mike said. He looked at Patricia. "So your complaint is that your neighbor is voluntarily clearing ice off your street so people can drive safely?" "My complaint is that he did not follow proper procedure," Patricia said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "We have rules in this community. If we let people just do whatever they want whenever they want, it creates chaos. What if he damages something? What if someone gets hurt? The HOA could be liable." "The HOA would not be liable for work performed on city property by a private citizen," Uncle Mike said patiently. "And from what I can see, Sam here is actually doing the city a favor, helping out his neighbors, being a good citizen." He paused. You know, when I was driving in, I noticed a few other streets in this neighborhood that look pretty treacherous. This ice is dangerous. People could really get hurt. That is what I have been trying to tell her, I said. Patricia's face was turning red now. Officer, are you saying you are not going to do anything about this? Madam, there is nothing to do. No laws are being broken. No ordinances are being violated. Your HOA rules do not supersede city jurisdiction on public streets. Uncle Mike closed his notebook. If anything, I should be thanking Sam for making this street safer. This is absurd, Patricia sputtered. I pay my taxes, I pay my HOA fees. And this is the response I get when I report illegal activity. It is not illegal activity, Uncle Mike said, his patience starting to wear thin. Look, madam, I understand you are trying to maintain standards in your community, but sometimes you need to use common sense. The man is removing a safety hazard. That is a good thing. Patricia opened her mouth to argue further, but Uncle Mike held up a hand. Tell you what, how about I stay here and supervise, make sure everything is done safely and properly? That way, if there are any concerns about liability or proper procedure, an official police presence can document that everything was handled correctly. Would that address your concerns? I could see the calculation happening behind Patricia's eyes. She clearly wanted to argue more, wanted to find some way to assert her authority and make me stop. But with a police officer not only approving of what I was doing but offering to supervise, she had lost her leverage. Fine, she said tersely. But I will be documenting this entire incident and bringing it up at the next board meeting. This kind of maverick behavior is exactly what the HOA is supposed to prevent. She stalked back to her Lexus, got in, and drove away slowly, her wheels slipping slightly on the ice until she reached the section I had already cleared. Once she was gone, Uncle Mike let out a long breath and shook his head. HOA president, you guessed it. They are always the same type, I swear. He walked over to the grader and examined it more closely. Nice equipment. You really do this for a living? Yeah, mostly commercial sites and parking lots, but I do some residential work too. When I saw how bad the ice was this morning, I figured I might as well put the grader to use. Takes me maybe an hour to do the whole street, but it would take the city crew half a day to get out here with everything else they have going on. Uncle Mike nodded. Your mom mentioned you started your own business 2 years ago. Sullivan Site Services. It is doing pretty well, actually. Just me and 2 other guys right now, but we stay busy. Good for you. He glanced down the street at the remaining ice. So you were not kidding when you told that lady you were going to finish this? I was about halfway done when she showed up. Just need to do the rest of this block and then the connecting streets in the neighborhood. Maybe another 45 minutes of work. Uncle Mike walked back to his patrol car and reached inside, pulling out a pair of reflective gloves. Well, if I am going to supervise, I might as well make myself useful. You need a flagman, I grinned. You are serious. I got nothing better to do for the next hour. My shift just started and it is a slow morning. Besides, your aunt would kill me if I let you do this alone and something happened. Uncle Mike, you do not have to do this. I know I do not have to, but that ice really is dangerous and you are doing a good thing here. Plus, it will drive that HOA lady crazy if she drives by and sees a cop actively helping you. He grinned. Call it my good deed for the day. I climbed back onto the grader while Uncle Mike positioned himself at the end of the cleared section, using hand signals to help guide me as I started scraping again. The work went faster with someone helping to keep an eye out for cars and pedestrians. Not that there was much traffic this early on a Saturday, especially with the ice keeping most people indoors. As I worked, more neighbors started coming out. Jim Martinez walked over with 2 thermoses of coffee, one for me and one for Uncle Mike. The Kowalski family gave us cookies. Old Mrs. Henderson opened her window and shouted her thanks, saying she had been worried about making her appointment on Monday. "See, this is what community is supposed to be about," Uncle Mike said during a short break. "People helping each other out, not getting bogged down in bureaucracy and power trips." "Try telling that to Patricia," I said, taking a sip of the hot coffee. It was exactly what I needed in the freezing morning air. "Oh, I have dealt with people like her 1,000 times. They get a little bit of authority and think it makes them important. HOAs can be useful for maintaining property values and organizing community stuff, but some people take it way too far." We were about 3/4 done with the main street when Patricia's Lexus reappeared. This time, she was not alone. A man in his 50s with a carefully groomed beard and an expensive-looking wool coat stepped out of the passenger side. I recognized him as Gerald Tucker, the vice president of the HOA board and Patricia's most loyal supporter. "Officer," Gerald called out as he approached. "I am Gerald Tucker, vice president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. I need to speak with you about this situation." Uncle Mike walked over, his expression neutral. "What can I do for you, sir?" "Patricia informed me that you are allowing this unauthorized maintenance to continue. I need to make it clear that the HOA board has not approved this activity, and we are concerned about potential damage to the road surface, as well as the precedent this sets. If we allow residents to just take it upon themselves to perform maintenance without oversight, it could lead to all sorts of problems. As I explained to Miss Chambers, this is a public street under city jurisdiction," Uncle Mike said. "The HOA board does not have authority over public roadways." "But surely there are regulations about operating construction equipment in residential areas. Permits that need to be filed, insurance requirements, safety protocols." "Mr. Sullivan has his commercial driver's license. The equipment is properly registered and insured, and no laws or ordinances are being violated. I have verified all of this." Uncle Mike's tone was professional but firm. "And as a police officer, I can tell you that what he is doing is making this street safer. That ice is a serious hazard." "That may be, but it is not his responsibility to address it. That is what we pay city services for. And the city will get here when they can," Uncle Mike said. "In the meantime, a resident is voluntarily helping out. I do not see the problem." Gerald's jaw tightened. "The problem is about maintaining order and proper procedure. We have a system in place for a reason." "Your system does not apply to public property," Uncle Mike repeated. "Look, I understand you have concerns, but there is nothing illegal happening here. If you have issues with how city property is being maintained, you need to take that up with the city, not harass your neighbor who is trying to help." "Harass?" Patricia had gotten out of the car now too. "We are not harassing anyone. We are trying to enforce community standards. By calling the police on someone removing ice from a street," Uncle Mike raised an eyebrow. "That seems excessive." "We have a responsibility to all residents of this community," Gerald said stiffly. "Not just to indulge one person's desire to play hero." "I am not playing hero," I called out from the grader. "I am just trying to make it so people can drive without sliding into each other." "No one asked you to do that," Patricia snapped. "Actually, several people did," I said. "The Kowalskis asked me yesterday if I could help. So did the Martinses and the Hendersons. They know I have the equipment and the skills." "Which makes this even worse," Gerald said. "You are essentially operating a business out of your residence without proper permits or licenses." "I am not charging anyone," I said. "This is just neighbors helping neighbors. That is not what it looks like to us," Uncle Mike stepped forward slightly, his body language shifting into something more authoritative. "Mr. Tucker, Miss Chambers, I am going to say this one more time very clearly. No laws are being broken. No ordinances are being violated. Your HOA rules do not give you authority over public streets. If you continue to interfere with Mr. Sullivan performing voluntary community maintenance, I will have to consider whether you are creating a public disturbance yourselves." There was a moment of tense silence. I could see Gerald and Patricia exchanging glances, trying to figure out if Uncle Mike was bluffing. He was not. "This is not over," Patricia finally said. "We will be contacting the city, the mayor's office, and our attorney. This kind of vigilante maintenance cannot be allowed to become a precedent." "You do what you need to do," Uncle Mike said calmly. "But right now, I suggest you let us finish this work so people can get in and out of their homes safely." Gerald and Patricia retreated to the Lexus, but this time they did not drive away. They parked at the end of the street, clearly planning to watch and document everything we were doing. "They are going to be a problem," Uncle Mike muttered as he walked back toward me. "They have been a problem since I moved in," I said. "This is just the latest thing." "What else have they done?" I told him about the mailbox incident when Patricia had sent me a violation notice because my mailbox was black instead of the approved shade of dark bronze. Then there was the time she tried to fine me because my grass was too long, even though I had been out of town for a week on a job and had arranged for a neighbor kid to mow. He had done it, but apparently not soon enough for Patricia's standards. She had measured my grass with a ruler, documented that it was 3.5 inches instead of the maximum allowed 3 inches, and sent me a formal citation. "That is insane," Uncle Mike said. "It gets better. Last summer I put up a small shed in my backyard for tools and equipment. I checked the bylaws, made sure it was under the size limit that required approval, and put it in a spot where it was not visible from the street. Patricia still tried to make me take it down, claiming it was an eyesore and violated the aesthetic standards of the community." "Did you take it down?" "No. I pulled out the bylaws and showed her exactly where it said that structures under 100 square feet that are not visible from the street do not require board approval. She backed off, but she was not happy about it." Uncle Mike shook his head. "Some people just need to have control over everything." We got back to work, and over the next 30 minutes we finished clearing the main street. The pavement was completely visible now, safe for cars and pedestrians. Several more neighbors had come out to thank us, and a few had taken pictures to post on the neighborhood social media group. "You want to do those side streets too?" Uncle Mike asked. "If you have got time. There are 3 short connecting streets that are in pretty bad shape. Would only take another 20 minutes or so. Let's do it." As we moved to the first side street, I noticed Patricia and Gerald following in the Lexus, maintaining their surveillance. It was absurd, but also kind of amusing. They were so determined to catch me doing something wrong that they were willing to spend their entire Saturday morning watching me scrape ice. We cleared the first side street without incident. Then the second. By the time we started on the third and final street, it was almost 9:30 in the morning. The sun was higher now, and the temperature had climbed a few degrees. I could hear kids playing in nearby yards, freed from the indoor imprisonment that the ice had imposed. I was about halfway down the last street when I heard shouting behind me. I stopped the grader and looked back to see Gerald Tucker running toward us, waving his arms. "Stop! Stop right now!" Uncle Mike held up a hand, signaling me to wait, and walked over to meet Gerald. "What is the problem now?" Uncle Mike asked. "That is my driveway," Gerald said, pointing at the section I had just cleared. "He scraped ice from my personal driveway without permission, That is trespassing. I leaned over the side of the grader. Gerald, your driveway extends into the street. I was just clearing the apron so you could actually get in and out without slipping. I did not give you permission to touch my property. This is exactly what we have been talking about. You cannot just do whatever you want on other people's property. Uncle Mike looked at the driveway in question. The apron, the part where the driveway met the street, was indeed clear of ice, but so was the entire street in front of it. Mr. Tucker, the street is public property. The apron of your driveway where it meets the street is technically city right-of-way. Mr. Sullivan has not trespassed on your property. That is my driveway, Gerald insisted. The city right-of-way ends at the curb. Actually, it extends 3 feet beyond the curb on residential streets, Uncle Mike said. It is part of the city easement for utilities and maintenance access. I do not believe you. Uncle Mike pulled out his phone and looked something up, then showed the screen to Gerald. Here is the municipal code, section 42.7. Residential street easements include 3 feet beyond the curb line. That area is city property, even if it is paved as part of your driveway. Gerald stared at the phone, his face reddening. This is ridiculous. You are just making excuses for him because he is your nephew. The words hung in the air for a moment. Uncle Mike's expression did not change, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. How do you know he is my nephew? Patricia looked you up. Officer Michael Sullivan, been with the department for 20 years, sister named Linda Sullivan, who has a son named Sam Sullivan living in this neighborhood. It is not hard to put together. So you are suggesting that I am not doing my job properly because of a family relationship. I am suggesting that this whole situation looks very suspicious. A resident violates multiple HOA policies, and when we call the police, the officer who responds just happens to be related to him, and not only allows the violations to continue but actively helps him. Uncle Mike took a step closer to Gerald, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Mr. Tucker, I am going to make something very clear to you. I have been a police officer for 20 years. In that time, I have written up my own brother for a traffic violation. I have arrested my cousin for domestic disturbance, and I have testified against a childhood friend in court. I do not play favorites, family or otherwise. The reason I am not stopping Sam from clearing this ice is because he is not breaking any laws, period. The fact that he is my nephew has nothing to do with it. That is convenient. No, that is professional integrity. And if you continue to question my judgment or suggest that I am not doing my job properly, I can add you to the report I am filing on this incident as a complainant making unsubstantiated allegations against an officer. That is a matter of public record, by the way. Gerald seemed to realize he had overstepped. I am just concerned about proper procedure being followed. Proper procedure has been followed. Multiple times now, I have explained to you and Miss Chambers that no laws are being violated. You are welcome to file a complaint with the department if you think I am handling this incorrectly. In fact, here is my badge number. Uncle Mike pulled out a business card and handed it to Gerald. That has all the information you need to file a formal complaint. But I am telling you right now, the response you are going to get is exactly what I have already told you. Sam has done nothing wrong. Gerald took the card, looked at it, and then walked back to where Patricia was waiting by the Lexus. They had a heated conversation that I could not quite hear, but I could see Patricia gesticulating wildly. Sorry about that, I said when Uncle Mike came back over. I did not mean to drag you into family drama. Not your fault. People like that will grasp at any straw to try to get their way. He paused. But they are not entirely wrong that this could look questionable. I want to make sure everything is by the book so there is no room for them to cause problems later. What do you need me to do? Just finish up here, and then I am going to file a full report on the incident. I will document everything. The condition of the streets, your credentials, the fact that no laws were violated, the complaints from the HOA, all of it. That way, if they try to escalate this, there is an official record showing exactly what happened. Okay. Thanks, Uncle Mike. You really did not have to do all this. Yeah, I did. Not because you are family, but because what you are doing is right. Those people are abusing their HOA authority to bully you, and I am not going to let that slide. We finished clearing the last section of street, and by 10 o'clock, the entire neighborhood was clear of ice. Kids were riding bikes. Cars were coming and going without slipping. People were out walking their dogs. It was like the whole community had been released from frozen captivity. Uncle Mike took some final photos for his report, documenting the before and after conditions of the streets. Patricia and Gerald had finally driven away, but not before Patricia had rolled down her window and informed me that I would be receiving a formal notice of violations from the HOA board, with potential fines and legal action to follow. Let them try, Uncle Mike had said loud enough for her to hear. I will be happy to testify about what actually happened here. After Uncle Mike left to continue his patrol, I parked the grader back in my driveway and went inside to warm up. My hands were frozen despite the insulated gloves, and I needed about a gallon of hot coffee. But before I could even get my boots off, there was a knock at the door. It was Jim Martinez, my neighbor from across the street, along with his wife Rosa and their 2 teenage kids. Sam, we just wanted to say thank you, Jim said. That ice was brutal. We were stuck in the house all day yesterday, and Rosa was worried about getting to her nursing shift tonight. Happy to help, I said. Just seemed like the right thing to do. Well, you are probably the only person in this neighborhood who could have done it. That HOA president is probably going to give you hell for it, though. She already is. Rosa shook her head. Patricia Chambers has been a nightmare since she got elected. She and Gerald think they run this place like it is some kind of kingdom. Last year, they tried to fine us because our Christmas decorations did not match the approved color scheme. Can you believe that? Our decorations were not the right colors. What happened? We fought it and won, but it was a huge hassle. Had to go to a board meeting, present our case, deal with all their bureaucratic nonsense, and all over some decorations. She sighed. Anyway, we just wanted you to know that most people around here appreciate what you did. Do not let Patricia get you down. Over the course of the day, I had more neighbors stop by to say thanks. Some brought food. Some just wanted to chat and commiserate about the HOA. It turned out that Patricia and Gerald had been causing problems for a lot of people, but most residents were either too busy or too intimidated to push back. She threatened to put a lien on my house over a late fee, Mrs. Henderson told me when she came by in the afternoon. The fee was $15, and I was 3 days late paying it because I was in the hospital. When I explained that to her, she said the rules apply to everyone equally and there are no exceptions. Can you imagine? That is horrible. Oh, it gets worse. She also tried to prevent my grandson from staying with me last summer because the bylaws limit how long non-residents can stay in a home. He was recovering from surgery and needed someone to help him. But Patricia said that if he stayed more than 30 days, I would be in violation of the occupancy rules. What did you do? I told her to mind her own business and that she could take her occupancy rules and shove them where the sun does not shine. Mrs. Henderson grinned. I may be 83, but I am not about to let some power-hungry busybody tell me I cannot help my own family. Good for you. The point is, Sam, you did a good thing today, And you stood up to Patricia, which not enough people around here do. She needs to be reminded that she is not the queen of this neighborhood. By evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. The streets were clear, my neighbors were happy, and despite Patricia's threats, I had not actually done anything wrong. I figured I would probably get some angry letters from the HOA board, but I could deal with that. What I did not expect was the letter that arrived on Monday. It was delivered by certified mail, which was my first clue that this was serious. The envelope had the HOA logo on it, and inside was a 3-page document listing my alleged violations: unauthorized operation of commercial equipment in a residential area without HOA approval, creating excessive noise during prohibited hours, performing maintenance on common areas without board authorization, trespassing on private property, Gerald's driveway, engaging in commercial activity from a residential property, failure to comply with HOA directives from board members. The total fines listed came to $2,500, with a deadline of 15 days to pay or face legal action and potential liens on my property. I read it twice, feeling my blood pressure rising with each line. This was insane. Every single violation was either fabricated or based on a misinterpretation of the rules, but the thing that really got me was the threat of a lien. They were actually threatening to put a claim against my house over this. I called Uncle Mike first. They did what? He said when I explained the situation, $2,500 in fines, and threatening a lien if I do not pay within 15 days. That is complete garbage. I documented everything. You did not violate any laws. I know, but they are not claiming I violated laws. They are claiming I violated HOA bylaws. Okay, but HOA bylaws still have to be reasonable and legally enforceable. You cannot just make up rules and then fine people thousands of dollars for breaking them. He paused. You need to talk to a lawyer, a good one who specializes in HOA disputes. I was hoping to avoid that. I know, but these people are not going to back down. And if they try to put a lien on your house, that is serious. You need legal advice. He gave me the name of an attorney he knew, a woman named Sarah Morrison who had handled several HOA cases in the area. I called her office first thing Tuesday morning and managed to get an appointment for that afternoon. Sarah Morrison was in her 40s, with short black hair and a no-nonsense attitude that I appreciated immediately. I showed her the letter from the HOA, along with the photos and report that Uncle Mike had filed. Okay, first thing, she said after reviewing everything. This fine is completely unenforceable. They cannot charge you for violating rules that do not actually apply to what you did. The street is public property. The noise ordinance was not violated, and you were not engaging in commercial activity. This is basically the HOA board throwing their weight around because you made them look foolish. So I do not have to pay. Absolutely not. In fact, I think we should go on offense here. The HOA has a responsibility to act reasonably and in the best interests of all residents. Trying to prevent someone from making a dangerous street safe and then hitting them with bogus fines when they do it anyway is not acting reasonably. What do you recommend? First, we respond to their letter with a detailed rebuttal, explaining exactly why each alleged violation is baseless. We will attach the police report and photos as evidence. Second, we demand that they rescind the fines immediately. Third, we put them on notice that if they continue to harass you or attempt to place a lien on your property, we will file suit for harassment and abuse of authority. Will that work? It depends on how stubborn they are. Some HOA boards back down as soon as they get pushback from an attorney. Others dig in and end up costing their HOA a lot of money in legal fees defending indefensible positions. Either way, you are in the right here, and I am confident we can beat this." Sarah drafted a response letter that afternoon, and we sent it by certified mail the next day. The letter was 5 pages of detailed legal argument, systematically demolishing each of the HOA's claims and warning them of the potential consequences if they continued their course of action. I figured that would be the end of it. The HOA would back down, I would go back to my normal life, and Patricia Chambers would just have to live with the fact that she had lost this battle. But I had underestimated how far Patricia was willing to go. The following Monday, I received another letter. This one was from an attorney representing the HOA, a firm called Mitchell and Associates. The letter doubled down on all the previous claims and added new ones, creating a pattern of disregard for community standards, causing damage to street surfaces, which they claimed would cost thousands to repair, encouraging other residents to violate HOA rules by setting a bad example, colluding with a law enforcement officer to avoid consequences for violations. The new total amount they were demanding, $7,500, I immediately forwarded the letter to Sarah Morrison. "They hired Mitchell and Associates," she said when I called. "Those guys are hired guns. The HOA must be really serious about this." What does that mean for me? It means they are prepared to spend money on this fight. Mitchell and Associates do not come cheap. The HOA is probably going to rack up tens of thousands in legal fees trying to enforce these bogus fines. But I cannot afford to spend tens of thousands fighting this. You are not going to have to. Trust me, once they realize we are not backing down and they are going to lose, they will cut their losses. The trick is to make them understand that as quickly as possible. Sarah filed a motion with the county court, asking for a declaratory judgment that the HOA's fines were invalid and unenforceable. She also filed a counterclaim against the HOA for harassment, abuse of authority, and violation of Wisconsin HOA statutes that required boards to act reasonably and in good faith. The legal process moved slowly. There were filings and responses, motions and counter-motions. Winter turned to spring, and the ice that had started this whole mess was long gone. But the fight dragged on. In the meantime, life in the neighborhood got increasingly uncomfortable. Patricia and Gerald were actively campaigning against me, sending letters to all residents warning them about my pattern of violations and urging them not to encourage or support my behavior. Some people bought into their narrative. Others openly supported me. The neighborhood was essentially split down the middle, and it was creating a lot of tension. In April, there was an HOA board election. 3 of the 5 board seats were up for re-election, including Patricia's position as president. A group of residents who were fed up with her leadership style organized a slate of reform candidates, and I suddenly found myself in the middle of a neighborhood political battle. "We need you to come to the candidates' forum," Jim Martinez told me one evening. "A lot of people are talking about what happened with the ice incident. It has become a symbol of everything wrong with how Patricia and Gerald run things." "I do not want to be a symbol," I said. "I just want this legal stuff to go away." "I know, but you are involved now whether you like it or not. The election is next week, and the outcome could determine whether you are dealing with Patricia for the next 2 years or whether we get a board that is actually reasonable." I reluctantly agreed to attend the forum, which was held in the community clubhouse. About 80 residents showed up, which was apparently a huge turnout for HOA politics. Patricia was there, along with Gerald and the 3rd incumbent board member, a quiet man named Donald Reed who mostly just went along with whatever Patricia wanted. The reform candidates were Rosa Martinez, Jim's wife, who was a nurse and well respected in the community, a retired teacher named Helen Park, and a young lawyer named Kevin Chen, who had moved into the neighborhood the previous year. The forum was moderated by a neutral resident, and each candidate had a chance to make an opening statement before taking questions from the audience. Patricia went first, giving a speech about maintaining standards, protecting property values, and ensuring that rules were followed consistently. She made several veiled references to certain residents who think the rules do not apply to them, and the importance of having a strong board that was not afraid to enforce consequences. The reform candidates focused on transparency, reasonableness, and community building. Rosa talked about how HOAs should serve residents, not rule over them. Helen emphasized the importance of common sense and flexibility in applying rules. Kevin discussed his legal background and how he could help ensure the HOA operated within the law while respecting residents' rights. When it came time for questions, the first one was directed at Patricia. "Miss Chambers, can you explain why the board spent thousands of dollars in legal fees trying to find Sam Sullivan for clearing ice from the street?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "The board has a responsibility to enforce the bylaws consistently. Mr. Sullivan violated multiple rules and refused to accept responsibility for his actions. We had no choice but to pursue appropriate remedies." "But he was helping the neighborhood," another resident called out. "The city had not cleared our streets yet, and people were slipping and getting hurt. That does not give him the right to take matters into his own hands without approval. We have processes for a reason." "Your processes would have taken weeks," Rosa interjected. "By that time, someone could have been seriously injured. Sometimes you need to use common sense and appreciate when someone is trying to help, not punish them for it." The audience applauded, and I could see Patricia's face reddening. The rest of the forum continued in a similar vein, with Patricia and her allies defending their record of strict rule enforcement, while the reform candidates argued for a more reasonable and community-focused approach. When the election results came in the following week, the outcome was decisive. Patricia lost her seat by a margin of nearly 2-1. Gerald lost his seat as well. Donald Reed managed to squeak by with a narrow victory, but the other 2 seats went to Rosa Martinez and Helen Park. Kevin Chen did not win, but he came close, losing by only a handful of votes. The new board was seated immediately, with Rosa elected as the new president. One of her first acts was to call an emergency meeting to review all pending legal matters, including the lawsuit against me. I attended that meeting at Sarah Morrison's advice. The clubhouse was packed with residents who wanted to see what the new board would do. "First item on the agenda," Rosa said once the meeting was called to order, "the legal action against Sam Sullivan. I have reviewed the case file, consulted with our HOA attorney, and discussed the matter with my fellow board members. It is our unanimous opinion that this lawsuit was inappropriate and not in the best interests of the community." Patricia, sitting in the audience, stood up. "Point of order. The previous board made the decision to pursue legal action based on clear violations of the bylaws. You cannot just undo that decision because you like the violator. Miss Chambers, you are no longer on the board and you are out of order," Rosa said firmly. "Please sit down, or I will have you removed from the meeting." Patricia sat, but she was clearly fuming. Rosa continued. "As I was saying, the board has determined that pursuing this lawsuit is not appropriate. Mr. Sullivan's actions were taken in good faith to address a legitimate safety hazard. The previous board's response was disproportionate and has cost the HOA significant money in legal fees that could have been better spent on community improvements. Therefore, The board is voting to drop all claims against Mr. Sullivan and to rescind all fines that were levied against him. The motion passed unanimously, 3-0, with Donald Reed abstaining. But Rosa was not done. Additionally, the board is opening an investigation into the previous board's handling of this matter and several other incidents over the past 2 years. There are questions about whether the previous board exceeded its authority and whether HOA funds were used appropriately. We will be bringing in an independent auditor to review the finances and an attorney to review the actions taken by the previous board. This is a witch hunt, Patricia said loudly from the audience. You are just trying to punish us for enforcing the rules. No, Miss Chambers, we are trying to determine whether the rules were applied fairly and legally. If the previous board did nothing wrong, then the investigation will clear you. But there are enough concerns that an investigation is warranted. The meeting continued for another hour, covering various other HOA business, but the big news was clear. I was off the hook, and Patricia's reign was over. As people filed out after the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me and congratulate me on the outcome. Mrs. Henderson gave me a hug and told me that justice had been served. Jim Martinez clapped me on the back and said I had become a folk hero in the neighborhood. But the real satisfaction came a few weeks later when the auditor's report came back. It turned out that Patricia and Gerald had been playing fast and loose with HOA funds for years. Nothing outright criminal, but a lot of questionable expenses that benefited them personally. Patricia had charged the HOA for mileage to official meetings that often turned out to be personal errands. Gerald had approved payments to his brother's landscaping company for work that was overpriced compared to market rates. There were numerous small expenses that, individually, looked innocent but collectively painted a picture of self-dealing and poor governance. The legal review was even more damning. The attorney found that the previous board had violated Wisconsin HOA statutes in multiple instances, including failing to provide proper notice before levying fines, exceeding their authority in several enforcement actions, and not following their own bylaws in board decision-making. Armed with this information, the new board sent letters to Patricia, Gerald, and Donald Reed demanding reimbursement for inappropriate expenses and threatening to file a civil suit if they did not comply. All three ended up writing checks back to the HOA to avoid further action. But the story did not end there. In late May, I received a call from Uncle Mike. "Hey, Sam, you got a minute? I need to talk to you about something." "Sure, what is up? You remember how Patricia and Gerald were documenting everything you did that day with the grader? Taking photos, videos, all that?" "Yeah, why?" "Well, it turns out they did not just keep those for themselves. They sent them to the district attorney's office, along with a complaint claiming that I had failed to perform my duties as an officer and had shown favoritism to a family member." My heart sank. "Oh no, Uncle Mike, I am so sorry." "Do not be. The DA's office investigated, reviewed my report and all the documentation, and concluded that I acted entirely appropriately. In fact, they sent me a letter commending me for how I handled the situation." "Really? Really?" But here is the interesting part. In the course of their investigation, they discovered that Patricia and Gerald had made several false statements in their complaint. They claimed that I had refused to investigate alleged crimes, that I had destroyed evidence, and that I had threatened them with arrest if they did not drop their complaints against you. None of that was true, obviously. What does that mean? It means they filed a false police report. And the DA is taking it seriously. They are considering pressing charges against Patricia and Gerald. Yep. Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in Wisconsin, punishable by up to 9 months in jail and fines up to $10,000. The DA does not like when people waste law enforcement resources with bogus complaints and false accusations. Wow, I do not want anyone to go to jail, but they really did try to cause a lot of trouble. That is what happens when you abuse the system. Actions have consequences. A few weeks later, both Patricia Chambers and Gerald Tucker were formally charged with filing a false police report. The case made the local news, with headlines about HOA leaders facing criminal charges for making false accusations against a police officer. They both ended up pleading no contest to reduce charges, receiving fines and probation. No jail time, but the criminal records and public humiliation were significant punishment in themselves. The HOA drama had finally, fully concluded. The new board under Rosa's leadership was running things smoothly and reasonably. The bogus lawsuit against me was dropped. Patricia and Gerald were gone from the board and facing criminal consequences for their actions, and I was free to go back to my normal life. But the story had one final twist. In August, the city of Green Bay recognized me at a city council meeting for my volunteer work clearing ice from residential streets during the February storm. Apparently, several other residents in different neighborhoods had written to the mayor's office praising me for helping out, and Uncle Mike had submitted a commendation on behalf of the police department. The mayor presented me with a certificate of appreciation and announced that the city was creating a new volunteer program for residents with equipment and expertise to help with emergency situations like ice storms. They were calling it the Community Response Team, and they wanted me to help organize it. "This is amazing," I said after the meeting, still holding the certificate. "I never expected any of this." "You did a good thing, Sam," Uncle Mike said. He had come to the meeting to see me get recognized. "And you stood up to people who tried to punish you for it. That takes courage." "I just wanted to help my neighbors." "I know, and that is exactly why you deserve this recognition." As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. What had started as a simple act of clearing ice from a street had turned into a neighborhood political battle, a legal fight, criminal charges, and ultimately, recognition from the city. It was a lot more than I had bargained for when I fired up the grader that cold February morning. But looking back, I would not change anything. Sometimes standing up for what is right means dealing with people who abuse their authority. Sometimes it means fighting battles you never wanted to fight. And sometimes, if you are lucky, it means having people like Uncle Mike show up at exactly the right moment to help you see it through. The streets in Meadowbrook Heights stayed clear that winter whenever ice threatened. The new HOA board under Rosa's leadership focused on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement actions. And whenever neighbors needed help with something, they knew they could count on each other rather than hiding behind bureaucratic rules. That February morning when Patricia Chambers called the cops on me for scraping ice had changed things in ways none of us could have predicted. It had exposed the problems with how the HOA was being run, led to real reform, and brought the community closer together. And it had all started because I just wanted to make sure Mrs. Henderson could get to her dialysis appointment safely. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest consequences. And sometimes, when someone tries to stop you from doing the right thing, the best response is to keep doing it anyway. Consequences be damned. The grader sat in my driveway, ready for the next time the neighborhood needed it. The HOA could not stop me from helping my community anymore. Patricia and Gerald had learned that abusing authority has consequences, And Uncle Mike had proven once again that integrity matters more than convenience. As I pulled into my garage that night, I saw Jim and Rosa Martinez sitting on their front porch across the street, waving at me. Mrs. Henderson was walking her little dog, stopping to chat with the Kowalski family who were tending their garden. The neighborhood felt alive and connected in a way it had not before all this happened. I waved back, feeling grateful for good neighbors, good family, and the chance to make a difference in a small but meaningful way. The certificate from the city was nice, but the real reward was knowing that when winter came again and ice threatened our streets, I would be there with my grader, ready to help. And this time, no HOA president would be calling the cops to stop me. Because I had already proven that doing the right thing was more important than following arbitrary rules enforced by petty tyrants. And my community had my back. That was worth more than any certificate or recognition. That was what it meant to be part of a real community, one that looked out for each other rather than looking for ways to tear each other down. The ice had melted months ago, but the bonds formed during that conflict remained strong. And I knew that whatever challenges came next, we would face them together as a community, not divided by an HOA board drunk on its own authority. The lesson had been learned, the battle had been won, and Meadowbrook Heights was better for it.